Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Real Birding Podcast, the show where we crack open the world of birding and talk about our own birding adventures. I'm Will Keller, coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Caleb Putnam in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Caleb, good to see you. How are you this week, buddy?
You too, man. Pretty good. Trying to stay warm now. We've over the last month we've swapped from too hot to too cold. It seems like, and I think it made me more of a wimp too.
But with that cold weather comes what? Lots and lots and lots of new birds. And also lots and lots of birds are leaving as well. That's what we are going to talk about after the intro. But first, I want to touch on last week's birding quiz. Last week, we played for y'all the song of a common loon. And that was a very unique sounding common loon. I can't say that I'd actually ever heard something sound quite that crazy. Maybe it's just because it wasn't coming across the steam of a northern boreal lake at dawn.
Wow. I have to say, I was thinking, and I assume others in the audience were, that it was one of the smaller species of loons. Just maybe you were as a harbinger of the Pacific conversation or something like that. Because yeah, it sounded kind of thin and I don't know, like higher pitched or something. That's very interesting.
It was giving the elk bugle a run for its money in terms of its haunting, piercing sound. This week, we are going to play for y'all the song or call of a North American bird, and you're going to guess the name of that bird in the comment. Chance at a shout out at the beginning of next week's episode. Here you go. That's all you get. If you think you know what it is, drop it in the comments. Otherwise, let's get into the show. Caleb, I'm so excited to talk to you this week because you are actually living inside of the topic that we're going to talk about right now. Whereas if I even ever get a polar vortex this year, we'll see if I have anything to show for it. But it looks like things like snowy owls may already be pushing. Maybe some glaucus and Iceland gulls are finally starting to encroach into the Great Lakes.
Absolutely. And it is a funny dynamic because I'll be seeing them first and you'll be seeing stuff maybe either not at all, or I'm kind of on the sending end of this and you're more on the receiving end. So it'll be real curious to see how that all shakes out. I feel like I learn a lot when my friends move to some other place, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely talking with other people around the state. I was talking with our friend Sky Haas last week, and he was saying, I think he found 6 snowy owls in one day along the Lake Superior lakefront in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan last week. And he was saying, hey, if there's a year for snowy owls to encroach into the South, this might be it. This is a lot of snowy owls for this early in the season.
And it happened really fast by appearances because frankly, it wasn't a species I was even thinking about. It's a bit early for how far south that I am, but yeah, man, looking at the map, like they are making it to the latitude of Grand Rapids already. They're just starting to hit right now. So that's a really cool sign. Yeah.
And it's so fun when they're around too. I was also talking with our friend Sean Fitzgerald last week, and he said that he has seen snowy owls at multiple airports from the plane over the course of his career traveling around the country and whatnot. And have you ever seen a snowy owl from a plane, like from the runway?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I've never had that happen.
The hard part is you can't see out the plane windows very well. You know how it fuzzes it a bit, but a part of it is because at the Grand Rapids airport, we have a parking lot overlook that you can view from, which is very rare. Most airports don't allow that. So we can sit there and scope the tarmac. I know where they are. So when I'm in the airplane out there, I just know right where to look is usually how it happens. But, you know.
Do you get them every winter at Grand Rapids?
I would say over the last decade, we had them every winter except perhaps one. And it was either last winter or the one before that. But dude, it was the weirdest thing because when I first moved to this county, which is like almost 20 years ago, we didn't really have them, or we weren't aware that we had them. But then we found out that the international airport had up to like 12 at the same time in good winters. And so then once we discovered that, our birding community here was getting them in numbers every winter. And it's almost gotten, I hate to say it, we've seen so many there. We've almost a little bit, we're not looking as hard anymore. Like, I mean, they're still awesome. Like that probably sounds like crazy talk to Southerners, but
no, it's a really interesting point, actually. When a bird becomes too regular and the twitchers have already got it for that county and have got it for their home county, they stop looking as hard and there might be fewer reports of the bird, even though it might be a common bird there.
Yeah, it takes targeted effort, and you gotta scope. Typically, you have to scope way out there in like really bad cold winds, and if you're looking for short-eared owls, you're not going to go out there until dusk probably. So it's not exactly the kind of birding conditions that get people terribly excited. But dude, just knowing that these are coming, like it kind of just got my heart rate up a bit. And I've only heard about it in the last few days. But let's throw the map up here. Actually, this is
Yeah, let's see it.
uh, it's always fun to. This is one of the advances with eBird that is just so much fun. You could just log in and get a real time look at everywhere that they are all across the country. You don't have to goof around at all.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, they're south of Milwaukee. There's almost made it to Port Huron on the Ontario side here of Lake Huron, and then the Dakotas are already seeing them as well. So it's early. I find that the peak for these guys in Saginaw Bay tends to be like December 10th, December 15, right in there, because that by then most of them have gotten in, and the ones that are going to leave and continue further south haven't yet taken off. It kind of seems like it peaks there, and
Really interesting.
people might get a kick out of this. I'm going to change the date range here, but speaking of this issue, snowy owls, they're like out in lakes and oceans and stuff. The satellite data have proven this with GPS trackers. They like to eat ducks way out in the open water, and it's kind of what they do in the Arctic too, apparently.
Hmm.
Often. So when they come down, they'll follow the Great Lakes shore like this, and then when they come down the east side, they'll get dumped at the bottom of Saginaw Bay, which also happens to be this area with the least trees here. You can see they're looking for places that feel like tundra, right? There's the fewest trees possible, like huge open expanses, and hunting a lot at night. A lot of the daytime stuff is kind of just keeping low profile. Probably about 6 years ago, roughly, my friends and I went over here with the goal of finding as many snowy owls as we could in one day, right around December 10th or 15th, which I knew was the peak time. So I set out like a grid system, and we spent the entire day, dawn to dusk, hitting all the grids and just driving basically from all the way down at the bottom here, all the way up by Seabuang and Bayport in the north. And
Yeah.
did I ever tell you how many snowies we found in one day?
Tell me.
35.
Wow.
35 separate individuals, and they're all plotted out here in eBird too. But
Here's my
basically,
question.
yeah,
Did you do them all on one eBird checklist, or did you do a separate bin for each sighting? Because that I'm sure would be a state high count.
and it illustrates another absurdity. Like we had the same issue with the cerulean count, remember? Because I had like
Yeah.
135, and it's one big long river. No, I did not do that to try to break the record, and actually it wouldn't have broken the record. This spot up in the UP here, everything's forced it until you get into these little patches here. So
Yeah.
these patches are just chock full of snowies, and they had like 100 in a day or at some point or something
Wow.
like that. Yeah, yeah. During
Oh my
like the peak
gosh.
of, so that'd be quite a sight to behold.
Let me ask you this about snowy owls. This kind of ties into our conversation we had a few weeks ago about bird eruption. Snowy owl is an interesting one because it seems like there could be like up to three forces guiding their movement, and the first would just be temperature, and snowfall, and the seasonality of it. The second would be how well their population did, which is often a function of how much prey there is available, like the lemmings up in the Arctic and whatnot. And the third would just be, is there some sort of natural clock that tells them, about December 15th, it's time to start pushing really far south down into the Great Lakes and whatnot. Do you have a sense of what appears to be the strongest of those three factors in this movement? It does seem like there's years where there's just a lot more snowy owls around,
It's super variable. There's years with almost none, and there's years with way more of them. And the last update that I had heard about this was that it was a combination of how many babies were hatched in the Arctic that summer, and whether the lemming was in its high or low cycle. Because there's I think the lemmings go in like a 4-year cycle, boom and bust.
Mhm.
And so it can be a combination of any of the two options of those two variables. So like if you had I think if you have lemming shortage and tons of babies, that's when you see the biggest eruptions. If you just have a lemming shortage but a normal year, there'll be fewer. If you have, you get my point, right? If you have very few
Yeah.
babies and a glut of lemmings, not that many birds are going to come south, and that's what I had always understood it to be. from the owl researchers who weighed in on it.
Yeah,
And it's
it,
less
it, it
weather
really speaks.
because that's the conversation we're really angling toward here is, the obvious thing is, well, it just got cold, it iced, it got icy, it got cold, and so that pushes birds out. That can be really relevant for short-term movements, and it depends on the species, but it actually tends not to be the main one for a lot of these birds. It's more food driven.
It's a kind of an interesting delineation between something like an American robin that theoretically could winter in just about anywhere in Michigan. You get robins wintering, but many of them just choose to migrate down to more temperate climates for the winter. It's not like that with a lot of these late winter moving birds. They're moving out of necessity, out of absolute necessity, and not necessarily out of just an instinct to fly south. At least that's my impression of what happens with things like glaucous gull and Iceland gull and these really high Arctic breeding birds.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And I think it varies by species. One thing I will say, having lived in the north most of my life and been watching birds certainly move on cold pushes of air. That is a thing. And I thought it would be kind of fun to explore that today. Do you remember a couple of winters ago, you and I were doing a work study in Indiana at the same time,
Mhm.
and we just happened to be out in the fields doing our surveys when the weather got like -10 and it was like a 20 or 30 mile an hour north wind. And I just have this vivid recollection of seeing skeins of sandhill cranes flying south with their legs tucked up and
Yeah,
folded up into their breast feathers, which is not normal. Usually the legs are hanging out the back, but you
famously.
know,
Yeah.
they are wasn't that an incredible day?
Yeah, it was them and it was the winter geese too. I remember there were so many not only greater white fronted geese, but snow geese and even Ross's geese moving that day as well.
Yes. And what was so cool about it is the birds were super urgent. They were acting frenetic and not like rest. They were like restless. Um, and they could have left Wisconsin or wherever they came from weeks earlier and headed south and to go find food and do everything, but they didn't. They waited and they got really pushed out when the real cold snap hit is when they got pushed. And I think, you know, it illustrates for a lot of these hardy cold weather wintering species. So like you said, waterfowl, cranes, things like tundra swans, ducks of all stripes. They just stay as far north as they can based on maybe the position of ice. Because if the ice shows up, it limits your access to the grubs or fish or whatever it is that you're going after. And sometimes for things like owls too, it's it, if they're trying to drop into the snow to grab voles, so things like great grays, um, you know, if if you end up getting a meltage on the top of the snow layer and then it refreezes, and so now the snow is impenetrable, then those birds will push in response to that. And I'm sure it causes a lot of mortality, but it's
Yeah.
it's just an interesting dynamic because it's not the weather itself, it's just the fact that the weather is causing it to lose access to its food. So it's still food, but they still act on the weather. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. One other great example of this, which is actually very unique to the Great Lakes, is the long-tailed duck situation on Lake Michigan. And I'm too young, I think. In your lifetime, has Lake Michigan froze completely over?
It's happened several times, yes, and it
So
shows up in the media typically. Yeah.
So for birds like long-tailed duck that are wintering on Lake Michigan, and a substantial portion of the entire long-tailed duck population ends up on Lake Michigan. I'm sure it's probably 100,000 birds at least. But they don't typically go all the way down to the bottom of the lake because it's one of these birds that they just don't care about the temperature and they're not going to fly further than they have to. Or maybe it's because there's a better food source a little bit further north on the lake. I don't know, but for whatever reason, you don't get them in Chicago or Gary or Miller Beach or these places, but you get them in Muskegon and Holland and Grand Haven and further north than that as well.
So that's another really good point. They have actually done surveys and where you take like a fixed wing aircraft or I think it was aircraft, not helicopters, and then you fly transects across the lake in midwinter to count these ducks and see where they're hanging out there. And you are correct. I think the number is like at least 100,000, and it could be as much as like 5 to 10% of the North American population of longtails is in out there in the wintertime. And when it ices up, all of those species get kicked inland, and they're like scrambling around. And one of the things we found in the past is a lot of them will end up in parking lots at night. So people will start finding like red-breasted mergansers on the sidewalk, or things that can happen in spring with loons, like March or April if they push hard,
Mm,
because they're flying at night and they see the reflection off of the pavement and think that it's water. They see the
the
moonlight
lack of
reflecting
reflection.
off. Well, no, it would be because whether it's ice or liquid water, it's going to give you a moonlight reflection that looks
Ah,
uniform.
I see what you're
So
saying.
they get confused. So that can be kind of a double whammy. The same thing at like solar farms, if the
Mm,
panels are all reflecting the moonlight up in a big 10-acre plot or whatever, the in the desert is particularly where it's bad. The birds will come in like grebes and stuff, and they'll land on it in the nighttime, thinking it's a lake, and then collide and die.
oh, I'd not heard
But
that. That's not a good thing to know.
no, no, it's not great. And there's solutions though. They can solve that by just studying it and making sure that you don't provide that visual confusion for the animals.
Yeah.
But in any event, it's the point is if you have a mild winter, stuff like long-tailed ducks and tundra swans, they don't even go all the way south to their winter grounds. Like tundra swans is another example. Um, they sort of do this migration out of the Arctic, and I'll switch the map over here. Um, they nest in the tundra up here, and then in the fall they'll do this migration south into the kind of the Dakotas and Minnesota area. And then, as you can see with the dark cells here, they work their way from there eastward across Michigan. That's why when we see them here, they're migrating east in the fall and west in the spring. It's not north south. And then
Yeah.
they'll end up at where you are, like coastal North Carolina, Pea Island, these coastal locations along the ocean. But what we found, the same thing with canvasbacks too, canvasback ducks, redheads. Um, if Lake St. Clair and the Detroit River, if this whole complex stays uh, unfrozen, they'll just stay here. Like they'll be like I think they've had counts of like 60,000 or something canvasbacks. Don't quote me on the numbers, but immense swarms of birds on Lake St. Clair in the wintertime, and I'm presumably on Lake Erie as well. And it's so mild in the modern era. It's
Yeah.
it's like legit changing the migration habits of some of these birds.
I just got to tell you about tundra swan in particular. I don't know what it is about that bird, but it's always the cruddiest day. Oftentimes, it's like literally Thanksgiving Day where you go outside just about any time of day and you can hear them. You can hear them all throughout the sky. There's days where there's probably thousands of birds moving through every single county in southern Michigan.
Dude, I have had some of my most amazing birding experiences with tundra swans, and I don't people who are not in the migration pathway won't know a lot about this, but it's I'm going to share the screen here. So
Yeah.
you'll be standing anywhere, and it's a quick migration window. Usually, maybe like a 3 week period in spring and a 3 week period in fall, and you'll be outside. You'll hear this like "Ooh, ooh, ooh, ooh," like ghosty
Hmm.
sound coming from the sky, and you're not sure where it is. You can't see anything. And a lot of the times it'll be like 200 tundra swans, and they go over in completely random locations. So that's a perfect example of the type of flocks that I've had in the past. And
And
then
they fly
they'll do it
high.
at night too. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I get them owling. I had this amazing experience. One of my best friends in college, I took him and his little sister out to Asylum Lake Preserve in Michigan at night, like at 8 or 9 p.m. when it was pitch black dark, just to look for screech owls and barred owls and great horns. And we get out to the lake. We start hearing this sound. I'm like, what's going on? I look up, and the preserve is right next to Stadium Drive, which is all lit up and illuminated, and these things are illuminated from beneath. It's just a huge flock of probably 200, yeah, like you say, 200 birds,
Oh,
and they just looked like ghosts flying through the air in the middle. I mean, really, it was pitch black. I'd never seen that before. I didn't know that they did that, so I was like, "What is going on?" It was magical.
I'm gonna play the noise. It's actually not dissimilar from sandhill crane, but it's less pterodactyly and less strident. It's a little bit more just like ghost sounds and softer high pitched noises. But yeah, a surreal experience when you finally get them. And be honest with you, now is about the time. I haven't had them yet, but we have got to be close to the right time here to start seeing these kind of that mid-November. There's a real magic to this, you know. That's one of the things with birding, right? That why we got into this in the first place is like sometimes you get surprised by it, right? If you're paying attention, you might not be surprised by all these because you can kind of know the timing for stuff. It's like, oh, winter is definitely arriving because you know that cold west weather pushed these birds. You know, it's like, am I having a dream? Like, what am I hearing right now? And then you look up and there's
Yeah.
white ghosts in the sky. Oh, it's just magic,
Yeah.
dude.
It's something. It's very primal. I mean, I try not to get too esoteric, too hippy dippy about this stuff, but it is magic. It helps really situate you in the place that you're at, in the time that you're at. You know what I mean? I do get surprised every single year. The first time I hear tundra swans going over, it'll be the morning on November 15th or something, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're here. There they are. You know, it's probably really hard to explain to somebody who doesn't know birding or doesn't know natural phenology, and you know when the flowers come out in the spring and when they start to die back and when the goldenrods get going in August, you know, it's just it's a really magical way to live life. I don't want to derail the rest of the episode talking about how awesome birding
No, but
is. We
it's
all know, all our listeners know too. But
and it's kind of like the way the holidays have that effect on us. You know, it's a sense of place,
yeah,
it's a sense of the timing and the rhythms of life, and you know, it just puts a lot of meaning into everything. It really injects all kinds of meaning and happiness and joy into life. You know, so
that
who
is
knows?
such a
Maybe I'll get
good
them tonight.
yeah. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. No, that holiday thing, that's such a good analogy, especially like May. It's like May is like almost the exact same thing as like Christmas season, like all of December for a lot of people, where it's like you're looking forward to the time off from work and seeing all your family and whatnot. In May, it's like you're just waiting for the weekend. You get 4 weekends in May to go out and have just the best birding of the whole year, you know?
It's almost like when you hear the first Christmas music of the year. You know,
Yeah,
it's the same time of year that you'd be getting your first whatever, you know, northern finches or thunder swans or whatever it is.
totally. Totally.
Dude, let's talk finches. So
Yeah.
you know, we've talked about eruptives in the past and the whole idea of birds that are pushing uh, unpredictably because the food source is changing, and you know those that could be in the summertime, it could be in the fall. I mean, really, eruptives can really have unpredictable moves. They tend to be, I don't know, I'd say on average they probably push mostly in late fall, early winter, and then retreat is whenever the food supply opens back up. But what's your thoughts here about like pine grosbeak and evening grosbeak, and even like things that migrate like chickadees and stuff, you know, out of the far north? You know, do they push on cold weather? Like, what is the impact of cold weather fronts of polar vortices on those species?
It's really hard to say. It seems like they're going to be less sensitive to it, maybe just on account of the fact that the things that they're eating are the seeds that are up in trees. So unless those get iced in or somehow covered up by snow, unless it gets really too cold, I feel like they're going to be okay. What's your experience with this?
I mean, part of it is we're asking a bit of an impossible question because we're not inside the birds' heads. But my impression about it is like if we were to go out on the dune the day of a big cold front being pushing through, I do think you're going to see an uptick in siskins and purple finches and you know, maybe some of the rarer ones if you're farther north than where we are, stuff like pine grosbeaks. But it's probably in that case, it's probably not that the food became unavailable to it. It's just that the conditions for moving the direction you wanted to go are really ripe at that moment. And I feel like the coldness creates a little frenetic energy. I don't know if I'm
Interesting.
reading or anthropomorphizing that, but it just birds don't seem relaxed when the weather gets crazy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You can certainly see that if you're a feeder watcher like I am. On those cold days, it just seems like the bird activity multiplies tenfold sometimes, you know, where you'll go from having just the local house finches to getting every house finch on the block coming into your sunflower feeder, you know?
Yeah. Dude, what about Bonaparte's gull? this is another one of these
Oh
ones that
yeah.
jumps to my mind when you're trying to think like what is it about these icy blasts that moves. So on the lakefront, we have this experience on Lake Michigan, and it'd be interesting to see if people on Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Ontario have the same experience in the ocean too. But in late summer, we get our first push of Bonaparte skulls. You know this. They show up, they molt. It's like warm out. It's still mid to late summer. August is
Yeah.
a big month for them. And then they kind of clear out, and like, I don't know, by the end of September, they're kind of cleared out. The ones that were there seem to, I don't know if they go to the Atlantic. And then you get this gap thing in October. But when you finally get another big push of cold air in November, there's another push of bonies, and you'll go out there and have 1,000 in a day come streaming down on a really strong north wind. It's one of my favorite ways to bird, by the way, when they're pushing. It's so fun.
We've talked about this before, and I think what's going on is we're getting birds that are coming out of like Hudson Bay and maybe further east, but there's this other population, or maybe it's not even a different population, but a lot of these birds do that whole molt thing on Lake Winnipeg. And then it seems like maybe those
Hmm.
birds are the ones that are moving into the Great Lakes later in the fall. Is that your understanding?
I never have understood what it is, and I'd love to know what the answer is, because I mean it's obvious that there are thousands and thousands of Bonapartes that stay somewhere up north until November, and then there's a whole other subset of them that clear out and come early, and you know it's not age separated because you get both age classes in both pushes. There's juveniles in with those molting adults in late summer. Um, Although I have to think about this. I do feel like the second push is more adults than youngsters, though. It's not there's no youngsters, but don't you get that impression too? Like the second push
I,
seems like it is mostly adults.
I honestly don't know. It'd be really interesting to talk to other lake watchers and see what they think. You know, another species that moves with that second push of Bonaparte skulls is black-legged kittiwake, which is kind of like
Oh
a,
gosh.
I mean, it's not like the crown jewel of lake watching, but that's like a good bird. Like that's fun. And usually you don't get them until that really, really strong first big cold push in November.
Absolutely. And I would say I got to put this photo up again. I know we've had this up in the past. So we have a story here. That is like one of the most awesome sights that you can have while doing your lake watch. In like you said, typically it's going to be like November. Even December is a great month for that too. And the juvenile black-legged kittiwake with the big black M. Any gull with a big black M on it's going to be good. We know
Yeah,
this.
that's a good rule. Yep, absolutely. And my claim to fame is I found that bird when I was on the. I'll not take credit for the photo. That's all the magnificent Dr. Ryan Sanderson. But I did get eyes on that bird, which is pretty fun. And it was
Yeah,
hanging out for like half an hour right in front of us, in with the ring-billed gulls right on the beach.
that's incredible, dude. I remember because I got my copy of the Goal Guide from Amar Ayash before I found out that you were involved in that bird because I didn't know anything about it. Um,
Yep,
and I think
pretty
I was there a
fun.
few days after that for the Pomeranian Jaeger too. But no, Kittiwake is that prototypical late gull. Sabins are pretty much through by then. Jaegers are pretty much through, but it starts to open up into like things like kittiwake and auk and more ducks, more of the kind of long-taileds and scoters and stuff like that, and eiders if you're on the ocean. Um, Dude, what about short-tailed shearwater? Since we're talking about
Oh,
ice up,
well, and this is a relatively new phenomena, or maybe it's not. Maybe we're just starting to detect it more with more birders around with better cameras and better gear. But yeah, dude, these birds are somehow making it over to the Great Lakes now. And I think, is it Brandon Holden who's done a little bit of digging to figure out what sort of weather patterns might be related to these shearwaters moving in?
I'm going to give you the short version, and actually, this is what gets my blood pumping, dude. Because
Oh yeah,
if
same.
depending on how this plays out in the next 3 weeks to 4 weeks, we may get another shot at this. We do not have it for Michigan yet, but we think we understand what's going on, and so I'll give you the try to do the quick version. I'm usually pretty long winded here. This is a
Yeah,
bird that
lay it on
nests
me.
in New Zealand. Yeah, wish me luck, right? So they breed in New Zealand, and then they immediately migrate all the way to the other side of the Pacific Ocean, and they winter in their austral winter they're hanging out in these kind of deep water shelves in the Pacific here, which are just food rich. There's tons of food. And my understanding is the ice north of Alaska and north of Yukon and Northwest Territories up in this area here has has been melting more, and what it's done is it's enticed these birds to fly all the way east of Alaska, and they're down in these areas here in the thousands now, and they used to be absent. They were never there. And so
Yeah.
the problem is there when this starts to freeze back up here and the ice front pushes like this, they are getting wrecked and thousands of these things are getting pushed south into Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and beyond. And like this is a perfect example here. They're popping up. This is like, yeah, this one's November 22nd. But they're being found on inland lakes. They're often emaciated and in bad shape. They're showing up on like people's driveways and stuff. And then many of them have now made it to the Great Lakes. It's crazy. The first one was at Braddock Bay 2 years ago, and nobody knew anything about this pattern at the time. So when it happened, we were all just like, what in the world is going on here? But this bird came right by shore. Look at this, dude.
Wow.
It'd be really hard to tell this from sooty shearwater, but they have less white in the underwing. They have a shorter beak and a more vertical forehead. But they were able to nail it with those photos. And then it was last year when ice up occurred in the Arctic, they immediately had this bird in Wisconsin. Actually, no, that was November 14th. That's tomorrow.
Wow.
And then a couple days later, during northwest winds, they had it in Bruce Bay, or Georgian Bay, excuse me, near the Bruce Peninsula here. And the winds, it's so stereotypical. The winds were pushing from the northwest. And so any bird that was out here was going to get knocked right down to the southeastern corner. And that's exactly what happened. And this bird was there for at least, I think, a couple of days. It was just kind of flying up and down the shore. And so when we heard about this, we're like, oh my gosh, we got to go to Port Huron and see if we can get one. And folks were kind of looking everywhere. And where they got one was actually, of course, at Montrose in Chicago. They get everything. So that was actually like a week or two later too. So yeah, this is the photos of that bird right there. I mean, just came right down it's just ludicrous, dude. But eventually we should get this in Michigan.
One of the funny things about that Montrose bird is there was a guy who's doing I think is it Lake County that Chicago's in?
Isn't it Cook? I think it's Cook.
Yeah, Cook.
Lake
He was doing
north.
a Cook County big year, and his record-breaking bird was a self-found short-tailed shearwater at Montrose Point. Do you remember his name? I'm sure it was one of those three names up there.
Tariq Shahzad.
Yeah, I think that's him. Yeah. So this was actually his
him.
self-found big year record-breaking bird. Can you imagine that, dude?
I can imagine it, but I don't actually believe that it's going to do that. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But like that is an absolute dream bird, and it's another one that in our wildest dreams, all of the years I've been birding here, I would have never thought we would be talking about an annual opportunity for tube noses in the Great Lakes. Like that does not happen. The tube noses we've had are all like one-off weirdos. But I'm just like on the edge of my seat to know when the Arctic starts icing up and then when the winds get right. And I'm going to predict this. I think I will see one of these in Michigan within the next few years. That's my prediction for you.
Well, I have no doubt that one will be found in Michigan in the next few years, but it takes a lot of discipline to be out there because it's not a bird that gets seen twice very often. You know what I mean? You kind of have to be there to get your eyes on it the first time, But
yes,
you are the guy to
most
get it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely, you're right. You want to be there right when it comes by because it's probably not going to stick. At Port Huron, there's a chance. And maybe like if it was found at the bottom of Saginaw Bay on a stiff north wind at Essexville, something like that. But yeah, boy, you want to be there when it's found.
Yeah. And another bird that, once it gets cold, time to start thinking about it. Caleb, did we do it? Did we break down polar vortexes and what happens when it gets cold and the birds that you can see?
I don't know if we explained what a polar vortex is very well. I don't know if I know what one is, but I think we got the bird side handled pretty decently. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Caleb, it was a pleasure. Do we have anything else to cover here?
Actually, yes, there is one more thing that we absolutely need to cover right now. And this is a follow-up on Tim Cornish's sandhill crane from last week that we talked about on air, but we didn't have photos at the time, but now we do. So essentially what happened is Tim is out birding at this site in Michigan, and he's got this smaller crane that's a juvenile. And this answers our question we asked: is it's a juvenile because the red crown is not fully developed; it's quite gray. And he is right about that. That's an indication that it's a youngster. So then his question was: is it smaller because it's a lesser sandhill crane, or is it smaller because it's like a juvenile of greater sandhill that wasn't fully developed yet?
Yeah.
And when I look at this, Will, you remember when we've seen lessers in flocks of graders, uh, the legs stand out as really short and the beak was like half size. So the fact that he's got this in photos with adult graders side by side is super helpful. And what I noticed right away, yes, it's shorter, but look at how the beak is the same exact size of the birds it's with.
Yeah.
Lesser is half size, and I really think this clinches that it's a less than fully grown grader. What do you think?
I think you're right, and it does seem like a quite a late date to get a crane that's that young. Maybe it was a really runty individual, and it's just always going to be a little bit smaller or something.
Well, there's definitely that opportunity and possibility, I should say, and it could be like not only a runt, it could be like malnourished. There's and it it doesn't necessarily mean that the thing hatched late, but I think it could be that too. I think it's possible that it's that. And I'll switch over to show folks what we're talking about here. This is the lesser sandhill that we had at the dune a couple springs ago. And if you look carefully, in all the photos side by side, the beak is literally half the length of the graders that it's with here. Let me get a better photo. Here we go. This is perfect. So this is greater here, and then this is the lesser. And look at how small and tiny that beak is, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, it's striking.
Compared to Tim's case, like I really think he's got a greater here, but it's the plot thickens. And Tim, we don't know. I don't know if it hatched late or what, but that's why birding is so fun, right? It's an endless process of learning. And if anybody knows the answer to it, put it in the comments. Let's hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, absolutely, and keep putting your little mysteries in the comments, and we will put our detective skills to work and try to get to the bottom of it. Other than that, what are the birds that you most look forward to seeing when it gets really cold out? We know that everybody has their own little preferences. I know some people will say, "What are you talking about? You like seeing Arctic gulls coming down? Nobody cares about gulls." So yeah, let us know what your preferences are, and as always, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode and go see some Arctic birds this week. Bird on.
Get out there and get cold, people. We'll see you next week.